Welcome back to What You'll Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
And my name is Adam Jones. We just interviewed big Jonah Berger.
We did his book, Contagious, How to Build Word of Mouth in the Digital Age. And we also touched a little bit on his other book, Invisible Influence.
Yes, so we delved a little bit deeper with a few very interesting stories, particularly around social currency. So he's got some great stories. He's great, Jonah. Joan of Arc.
Jonah Berger.
Jonah Berger.
Yeah.
If you're ever in New York City and you're walking around on the Lower East Side, you've been around all day, you've been walking, seeing all the sights, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Empire State Building, all that sort of thing. Your stomach is rumbling, you got to get a bite to eat. When you notice a big hot dog shaped sign out in front of a restaurant with the words, I think it's something like "Eat Me," written on them, it would look like mustard. So you walk down a flight of stairs into this restaurant called Criff Dogs. If you like hot dogs, you'd be in heaven. Criff Dogs has basically every hot dog you can imagine. I think they have 25 odd hot dogs. They have a Good Morning hot dog with bacon, eggs, and cheese. They have a hot dog between onion and pineapple. But once you finish your hot dog, whichever one you picked, if you look over in the corner, there's actually a phone booth. One of those old things that Clark Kent might jump into to change into Superman. And if you slide open the door and walk inside, there's something you probably haven't seen in even longer, which is a rotary dial phone. Maybe you had one at your grandma's or your mom's house, one of those things you stick your finger and you go around in a circle. So just for fun, stick your finger and say the number 3, go around in a circle and hold the receiver up to your ear. And it turns out that the phone will actually ring. It goes ring, ring, and then somebody will pick up the other line and they'll ask you whether you have a reservation. Now, the first time I heard this story, I was like, oh, hold on, what, a reservation? I'm in a phone booth inside of a hot dog restaurant. What could I possibly have a reservation for? But if you're lucky and they happen to have space, or a friend of yours happen to make a reservation, the back of that phone booth will open and you'll be led into a secret bar called Please Don't Tell. Now, Please Don't Tell has violated a number of traditional laws of marketing, traditional laws of communication. There's no sign in the street. There's no sign inside the restaurant. They've done everything they can basically to make themselves difficult to find. And yet every day they're full. 3 p.m., phone lines open up. By 3:30, all the seats are gone. People frantically redial again and again trying to get through. I finally got it on like a Tuesday night, probably 2 weeks after calling, not the most popular time. And so one question is, what did they do right? It's not lack of competition, right? Most people know New York. Turns out there's more than one bar in New York. There's actually quite a couple few bars in New York City. So what did they do right? And what they did, interestingly, is they made themselves a secret. So if you think about the last time someone told you a secret, they told you something and they told you not to tell anybody else, what's one of the first things you probably did with that information? And if you're like most people, you probably told someone, because having access to information that not everyone else knows makes you look smart and makes you look in the know. It gives you what I'll call social currency, right? Just like the car we drive and just like the clothes we wear, the things we talk about and the things we share affect how other people see us. And so one way to get more word of mouth, whether it be for a product, a service, an idea, one way to get something to catch on is not to make ourselves look good, but to make other people look good by talking about it. The more we can make people feel special, smart, like insiders in the know, the more likely they'll be to share, not because they like us, but because they want to look good to their friends and peers. But to do that, we come along for the ride.
Fantastic. I love it. And I love that it's a different way of thinking about it that until reading this book, I hadn't sort of thought of, that the things that people share, obviously everybody talks and everybody loves to talk, but the things that they're sharing is the things that make them look good to others, obviously that sense of social currency.
Yeah, that's certainly at least one of the things. And I work with a lot of companies and organizations, and they usually say something along the lines of, oh, yeah, word of mouth. You have to pay people for that, right? Like you have to give a referral fee to get people to talk. And referral fees certainly in the short term boost the number of referrals that you get. Anytime you pay people, at least if you pay them enough money, they'll do something. But in the long term, it decreases people's interest in referring for free, and you have to keep paying them to keep them doing it. And so it doesn't have very high return on investment. But if you think about it, think about a product or a service you love. Think about a vacation destination you like, a restaurant you enjoy. You don't talk about those things because someone's paying you to talk about them. You talk about them because you like them, because talking about them makes you look good, or a number of other motivations. And that's really what Contagious is all about, right? Understanding the psychological motivations, not just the economic or the monetary motivations, but the psychological motivations that drive people to talk and drive them to share, and help us understand how we can use those motivations to get people to talk about our stuff.
And it's also that depends who we're talking to will alter, I guess, what we say and how we tell it. Can you tell us a story about the cockroach study? Because I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. So this was a fun one, actually. An old friend of mine did, where they were kind of interested in whether people tell a story exactly how it happened, or people tell a story slightly differently than how it happened. And so they actually concocted up this crazy sort of laboratory experiment where they brought people into a room that was like a cooking room, and they said they were there for a cooking class, and they were going to do different things in the cooking class, and as part of the class they had to get all these different ingredients and set them up. And people are going through these various steps. You can imagine yourself, being in a cooking class, and at one point, to go to the fridge, and you get out one ingredient, you go to the fridge, you get out another ingredient, and then eventually you go to the fridge, and you're supposed to get the lettuce or something along those lines, and you pick them up, and there are cockroaches in the fridge. And they're interested to say, okay, well, hey, you saw some cockroaches, and there are indeed cockroaches in the fridge. How many cockroaches, though, do you tell people that you saw? Right? They put a certain number in there, but they look at what people say that they saw. And I think this is something all of us have seen all the time. Not our friends talking about stories about numbers of cockroaches, but when we tell stories, when our friends tell stories, we don't just tell the story as it happened. We often fall prey to what's called the extremity bias, right? We tell stories in ways that make them seem more engaging. If the flight was late, it wasn't just a couple minutes late, it was a long time late. If they lost our bags, they never got there. If it's something good, the dinner was amazing, everybody loved it, my vacation was perfect, all these things happened, and so you talk about things in an extreme way. If it's supposed to be good, it's not just good, it's great. If you talk about things in a bad way, it's not just it's terrible. And the idea is that by sharing these extreme stories, it kind of makes us look better, and it has a bigger emotional impact. And so we don't always tell things just about how they happened. Sometimes we tell them often tell them in a way to make them more engaging to the listener.
Yeah, 100%. We always add a little bit of salt and pepper and add so much to stories, but at the same time, we probably don't consider ourselves liars, even though it's not exactly true, right?
And what's interesting about that, right, is the question is, do we remember, right? Particularly if you don't remember how many there were, you're not actually lying. You're just sort of reconstructing that story. But I think we all recognize that, people are going to be more engaged with what we're talking about if it's a better story. I think the challenge we have in today's day and age with social media and all these other things online is everyone is trying to one-up everyone else's stories, right? So, you go to a nice vacation, someone else goes to a better vacation. So you want to go on an even better vacation. You have so much information you can see. There's always someone who's doing what you did or something better, that it creates this one-upmanship that I think can be really negative for our own well-being, right? There's a lot of nice research that shows that social media can actually lead us to be depressed and lonely and feel like our own lives are worse by comparison, because people don't just post whatever happens to them. They post the more extreme stuff, the more extreme positive stuff and the extreme negative stuff, but it makes it look like everyone's life is more exciting than ours is, and we may be disappointed as a result.
This makes a lot of sense in terms of, really cool product, like the secret bar behind the back of the phone booth that you have to get in at the right time. That's amazing. But what about some boring products that you might think, oh, this is not something that's worth talking about? How can we make a boring product more contagious?
It's funny, and this is an old example, but I'll start with a new example, and I'll give you an old version. I was doing a speaking event recently, and I went to the event, and they had water like they usually do, but it was water in a box. So imagine the milk cartons you might have drank growing up at school or something along those lines. It's like that, but water, and it's taller. And I had never seen water in a box before. So I was like, why is the water in a box? What is this with this boxed water? And I told a number of other people about it because I had never seen anything like it. Now, let me tell you, that's water in a box. Neither of the things by themselves are particularly remarkable and have a lot of social currency, but together, you've never seen water in a box before, it makes it a bit more engaging. And I use this other example in class. It's an old one, but remember what ketchup used to be like, right? Remember when ketchup used to get the Heinz bottle. It was made of glass. It was very heavy. It was sort of beautiful, but it took a long time to get ketchup out. You had to smack the bottom and smack the bottom and smack the bottom. So what did they do eventually? They came out with a plastic container where they flipped it upside down. So it's actually, when you take it out of your fridge, the bottom opens up, right, and ketchup squeezed right out. Now, today, we've seen that before, and so it's not novel. But the first time that happened, right, people talked about it because it was interesting. It was different. It's a ketchup bottle. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. They're selling ketchup, and all they're doing is changing the packaging. But by making it feel remarkable, by making it surprising, novel, or interesting in some way, shape, or form, they got people to talk and got people to share. And so, to me, the question is not, is something born remarkable or not? I agree. A bar hidden inside a hot dog restaurant is pretty cool. But we can apply the same principles, whether we're trying to get people to talk about water and ketchup, or, a political initiative, or boring things like, dishwashers and blenders and socks, right? As long as we find that inner remarkability, we can get people to talk and get them to share.
Nice. I've got a similar sort of story of last weekend. I was at a bar and I got a can of beer. I normally hate canned beer, but this one was very remarkable, very different in that it wasn't just your standard where you pull the tab and a little tiny circle opens. The whole top pulled off the top of the beer, leaving like a wide open cup as opposed to just a tiny little hole like every other can. So I thought that was something completely different, and I've told a hell of a lot of people since then just because of something completely different.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting about that is that completely different from anything we've ever seen before? No. But it sort of was different than our expectations, right? And anytime something is unexpected, it violates our expectations, even if it's a domain that's not very exciting, we're more likely to talk about it. And so the question, if you're trying to get the word out about your thing, is how can you violate expectations in a good way, even if the domain is not one that might naturally seem remarkable?
Another one of the things you talk about in your book, which we really like, is the idea of triggers. And the Kitkat Corporation used this in a really good way not too long ago. Can you tell us a little bit about how KitKats used triggers to really revamp up the KitKat uptake?
Sure, yeah. I'll tell maybe the Kitkat story, and then I'll talk a little about the science behind it. So many people are familiar with KitKat. They're the candy bars that are filled with chewy wafers. At least in the United States, they're very popular around Halloween. And they sell pretty well, but a few years ago, they weren't doing it as well. People still liked the candy. If you asked them, how much do you like the candy, they would have said, I like the candy just fine, but they weren't buying it. And so KitKat was trying to figure out, the maker of KitKat was trying to figure out, what do we do about this? Usually we think about advertising or, marketing communications as changing people's attitudes, but here it didn't seem like attitudes were the problem. What was the problem? And so they ended up coming out with this campaign called KitKat and Coffee, a break's best friend. Where they tried to link the two together. So they'd have a number of things where it would say, have a coffee break, have a KitKat. Thinking about coffee, think about KitKat. Coffee and KitKat and coffee, best friends forever. And what it did was something really interesting. Right now, when people went to get coffee, they were more likely to think about KitKat. It didn't change how much they liked KitKat. It changed how often they thought about KitKat. But it did it in a really interesting way. We think about advertising sometimes as reminding us to buy a product or service. So, why do we see so many ads for cars or insurance? Because they think about reminding us of the brand will make us purchase it. And indeed, 70% of purchase is consideration. If you're thinking about something, you're much more likely to buy it. But doing that through ads is really expensive, right? If we have to remind someone every time that we exist by using paid media, it's pretty expensive. What KitKat did that was just super cool is they used the environment as a reminder. Rather than having to pay to show people that reminder, they linked themselves to something in the environment, and everything that a thing in the environment came up, it reminded them of the product or service. And that's what's called a trigger, right? It's a reminder in the environment, something that triggers us to think about something that isn't necessarily there. So at least in the U.S., for example, if someone said peanut butter and, their friend might fill in the word jelly. Or if someone said rum and, they might fill in the word Coke. These things are associated in people's minds. People think milk and cookies. If I'm going to go watch a movie, I eat popcorn. And some of these things are culturally dependent, so you may not agree with all of them in your own lives. But at least in the U.S., those are some associations. And what's neat about that is if we see one of those things in the wild, it reminds us of the other one. Even if that other thing isn't there, it acts like a sort of a natural environmental reminder or environmental ad to make us think about that thing. And that's exactly what happened with KitKat, right? Lots of people drink coffee. They drink it often. And so now when they drank coffee, they were more likely to think about KitKat before. They were more likely to buy it. And then sales went up by about $50 million, which is pretty good for the amount they spent on the campaign. And so again, they didn't change how much people liked the brand, right? People still liked it the same amount. They just changed whether people thought about it or not.
Fantastic. I need to build in a trigger for myself, because about 2 months ago, Australia outlawed plastic bags at supermarkets. They sort of phased them out, and now they're completely gone altogether. So you need to bring your own bags. And the only time I remember that I need to bring my own bag is when I get to the checkout with an armful of stuff. How can I sort of build in some kind of trigger earlier to make me remember to bring that reusable bag before I get into the supermarket?
I love your example, and to me, reusable grocery bags are my favorite example of triggers. And what's so funny about bags is, if you're like most people like you, right, we mean to bring our bags. We want to bring our bags. We go to the store. We do all our shopping. We get to the checkout line. We go, oh, God, I forgot my bags. And you're not going to go back home to get your bags to come back to the store, right? There's a reminder there, but it's kind of too late. It's like if we want to remind people of our product and they only think about it once they've already purchased from the competitor. It's not just frequency of being reminded. It's not just more times is better than less. It's when do we want people to think about us, right? When is the right time, whether it's time of day, day of week, something in the environment is happening, when is the right time to come to mind? For reusable bags, for example, it's really important that people think about me before, if I want people to remember bags, before they leave the house, because if they don't think about it before they leave the house, they're not going to take their bags with them, right? And so it's not just are they thinking about us, but at the right time. In my own house, for example, whenever I'm done using the bags, I put them at the bottom of the stairs to go out to the car, to go in the trunk, so that next time I get to the store, they're already there. And so I take that shortcut to make sure the environment reminds me of what to do. And that's the same idea more broadly, right? Whether we're trying to get something to catch on or whether we're just trying to change behavior, whether that be our own behaviors or others, triggers are a great way to do that. If we think about habits, for example, you might have a habit that you're trying to get rid of. Maybe you're trying to eat healthier, or maybe you're trying to exercise more, or some other habit. Triggers often kick off the habit loop. Right? There's one thing in the environment that you see or hear or smell, and that thing reminds you to do something else. And so don't just want to do something, right? Make sure you use the environment as a reminder to help you actually do that thing.
So all your ideas in the book, Contagious, Jonah, they seem like if the marketer does X, then the customer's always going to do Y. Or if you share an idea, it's almost like we're robots, and if you press a button, we're going to do certain things. Now, is that actually how we live in everyday life? We're just robots. You press a button and we react based on what the environment does to us.
Yeah, so that's a deeply philosophical question, but I'll try to do my best to answer it. And what I think a good way to think about it is these things on average are true. So a good way to think about it is if the weather says it's going to rain today, there's a 75% chance it's going to rain today. Does it rain every single day? No, but it rains more often than not, right? They've been able to predict the weather with some degree of accuracy. And they have certain things they know when these things happen. When there are more clouds, there's probably more rain. Is there rain every time you see a cloud? No, right? Sometimes there are clouds and no rain. But in general, more clouds, more likely to rain. And the same thing is true of the steps, right? Same thing is true with human behavior. In general, when certain things happen, other things are more likely to happen. People tend to talk about things, the better those things make them look. Does that a guarantee that if you use the ideas of social currency, everyone will talk about your product all the time? No, but what it isn't guarantee is that more people will talk about your product more often. People often, they hear the steps and they think viral videos, right? They think, oh yeah, the goal is to make something viral, right? If I understand these steps, I can get something to get millions of views online. And these steps do explain why things go viral online. But what I think they're much more interesting for and much more important for is what I'll call each one reach one, right? How can we get every person who listens to our show, buys our product, uses our service to tell just one more person about us? Because we bake these principles in, people will be more likely to talk, more likely to share, and they'll be advocates for our products and our services and our ideas.
Sick. Sounds like we've still got some free will there, which is fantastic.
A little bit.
We do it. We do indeed. Yes, do have a little free will.
Right.
I think that makes sense for most people, but I'm sure that it doesn't happen to me, Joan. I'm not being influenced by these petty little things in my environment, am I?
Yeah, you are.
That's the funniest thing about these things to me, right? We never think they're true of us. Like if we look around in the environment, we say, oh yeah, my friends, they always are talking about things that make them look good. They're always bragging. They're always, doing these things, but not me, right? I would never do that stuff. And unfortunately, we're wrong about ourselves, or fortunately, we're wrong about ourselves. Everyone, all humans, these things affect our behavior, whether we like it or not.
To finish up, we always like to ask, what are some of your favorite books and books that you'd most recommend?
It really depends on what you're interested in, but I'll give you a couple broad favorites that I love. One is called Made to Stick. It's all about why we remember certain things and not others. So I remember some stories and rumors and urban legends or ads, and how we can use that to, whether it's make better presentations or make sure people remember our messages or ideas. Another favorite of mine is called Micro Motives and Macro Behaviors. It sounds technical, but it's all about how our behavior is shaped by others, which then shape our behavior in turn. It's an old famous book by a guy that won the Nobel Prize, Thomas Schelling. And then I'll give you one more, but called Diffusion of Innovations, which is all about why some innovations succeed and others fail, understanding aspects of people and items and diffusion processes and social networks that lead things to succeed. Again, it sounds technical, but it's a quite easy read and has a lot of interesting implications, whether business or personal life.
Fantastic. And what projects are you working on now, and what do you have on the horizon?
So I'm working on a new book, actually. Yeah. Funny that you asked. It is due early next year, but will be out the following year, all about how we can change people's minds. So it's going to be called The Catalyst, and it's all about how to change people's minds, not by pushing harder, but by removing the barriers to change. Usually we think we want to persuade someone, we want to get them to do something. If we just push harder, they'll take action. But a lot of times a more efficient, effective way is to remove the barriers that are preventing them from changing. And so the book is all about how to identify those barriers and change anyone's mind.
It sounds phenomenal. Looking forward to that. And where can
Thanks.
Where can people find you and check out your books and stay in the loop for Catalyst when it comes out?
Yeah, sure. So easiest place to find me is just my website. That's Jonah, Jonah, Berger, BERGER.com. Books are available wherever books are sold. You can find me at J1Berger on Twitter.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jonah. Really enjoyed it, and all the best with the new book.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonah.